Hi, welcome to the Angular 0 to 60 tutorial, where we learn a bit about what Angular is and then start a project in which we'll use most of the core Angular features that you'll need to master the framework. Now, what is Angular? Angular is a front-end framework developed and maintained by a team of developers at Google. It is used for creating user interfaces in the form of single-page applications. An emphasis on framework, because Angular enforces opinionated ways of writing applications and offers a wide range of features that come baked within the framework, such as the Angular CLI, HTTP module, form validation, and many others. Angular has got you covered. You want to create a progressive web app? Angular supports that by default. You want to do server-side rendering? Angular Universal is your buddy. State management? NGRX is on duty. Seriously, Angular has got you covered. In other libraries, I'm looking at you React, you can install third-party libraries like Axios, Next, and Redux to do all these things, and you can achieve the same result. However, when all these features are developed and maintained by the same people, the synergy is always there. They're always updated together, and there's never breaking changes. Now, we use Angular to create single-page applications, which are web applications that give the illusion of a mobile or offline app by refreshing just parts of the page and rendering just the new or edited ones without having to refresh the entire page. This makes the app much faster and much more seamless and immersive. When you learn Angular, not only that you create desktop web apps, you can also use it alongside frameworks like Ionic or NativeScript to create hybrid and native Android and iOS apps without having to learn an entirely different framework. So it's really useful in that regard. Like all modern UI frameworks, Angular works by creating components and combining them to make up a page. Each component holds its own logic, data, markup, and style, and even a test file in the form of an HTML, a CSS, and a TypeScript file. Components can have other components nested within them. They can also communicate with each other using events or actions, and they can also share logic contained in services using a cool TypeScript feature called dependency injection. Angular has amazing template features that make displaying dynamic data in HTML super convenient with minimal code. Things like string interpolation, directives, pipes, loops, one or two-way data bindings, and more that I'm forgetting. All these features give us a complete control and customizability over our markup. Unlike other frameworks, Angular by default uses TypeScript. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. It's basically JavaScript with static typing and type classes and interfaces. The type safety that it brings saves us a lot of time by displaying syntax and type errors before we hit runtime, and makes our code more robust as our applications grow bigger. The IntelliSense and IDE support is quite handy as well. TypeScript can be an additional thing to learn when getting started with Angular, but it is well worth learning in my opinion, especially for beginners as it enforces a number of good practices by definition. Now, what are the prerequisites that you need for this video? You need to have npm or yarn installed just to install the CLI, the Angular CLI. And using either of them, you can install the Angular CLI using these commands, either npm install -g angular/CLI or yarn add global Angular CLI. And you also need solid JavaScript knowledge. I can't emphasize this enough. You have to understand how to use fundamental language features like data structures, loops, conditionals, and expressions, async features like callbacks and promises, higher order functions like map and filter and sort. You need to be comfortable using JavaScript in general. Seriously, if you're not yet familiar using JavaScript, do not learn a JavaScript framework yet. I personally have made this mistake in the past where I learned the framework while learning the language itself. This can cause many problems. One of them is that if you don't have a solid understanding of the language, your learning will be tangled between two things and it will be much slower than it could be. So guys, if you're not familiar with JavaScript, go and get familiar with that first. If you are, then you are right at home. Anyway, enough of the theory and let's get to the code. For this project, we're going to be using a simple CRUD API that I created in a past video using AWS Lambda and DynamoDB. I'll put a link in the description for that video if you want to do that tutorial. If not, you can just follow along. It's identical to the JSON placeholder API, but the only difference is that this one, the data actually persists in this one. So if you send a post request and send a post, it actually persists, and if you reload the page, you still get that same data. It's pretty much the same. You can still use JSON placeholder if you prefer. So this is the API. I'm going to put as well the API base URL in the description. So if I send a GET request to the base URL /posts, I'll get all of the posts sorted by created at. And if I send a post request to /post with a object with the title, let's say new post, and a body of new post body, and hit send, it'll create that, it will return that post. And if I hit send on /posts as a GET request, I get all the posts with the new post as well. And I can take this ID of this new post and edit it, sending a put request to /post /that ID. And we could say edited post title, and say the same here, edited post body, body, and hit send on this put request. And it returns that that post. And if I send a request to /posts again, you get that post and it's been edited. And we can as well send to /posts / a number of posts to limit only to that number. So we can say, let's say 2, and I'll only get 2 posts. And we can as well send a delete request to delete a post. So this is the API we'll use in our Angular project. All right, so let's actually create our Angular project. So here in my desktop, I'm going to open up a terminal window. And to check that Angular is installed, we can run ng --version. And here it tells me that I have 7.3, so I have it installed. So to create a project, we're going to say ng new, and I'll call this ng-starter. And hit enter. Okay, so now that it's done installing, we can actually open it up. So let's open this folder. I'll open it using VS Code. So this is what we get with our Angular project. Now I'm going to go over the important files. So here we have any npm based project has a package.json file. We have a couple of scripts, including the start, which is the ng-serve script, and the command rather, and the build command, a couple of dependencies and dev dependencies, nothing fancy. We get our Angular JSON file, which holds some variables and some configuration objects or values. And we get our source folder, which is where our app is. And here we have a global styles file, and we have our index.html. And here we have this selector app root, and here this is where our Angular app is gonna go when it's started. So here in the app folder, we get our app module file, and the app module is where all our modules and dependencies meet and components. And whenever we add a component, we need to add it to this module, or we can actually create other modules and add them to this module as well. So we get our app component TS file. So this is the base component. This is the component that holds all of the app. Right now it's just got some basic markup. So let's actually start this app and see what it looks like. So here I'm going to open a terminal window and say ng serve, and this will now compile all the files and start our application on port 4200. All right, so it's compiled. I'm gonna go up and hold control. Actually, I can do that here. Hold control and click that. And there we go. This is our app, nothing fancy, just the boilerplate of Angular. And so this is coming from the app component here. So if I say here's, let's say header 1, our app, and just save, it's gonna compile again. And we can see it has hot reload, so it instantly reloads and gives us our update. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually import Materialized Css. And I know if later when you get comfortable with Angular, you will be using something called Angular Material if you want to use material design. But I didn't want to use it for this video because it might get too complicated with all the selectors of Angular Material, and you would be confused what's Angular Material and what's Angular. So I'm just going to use the CSS library for now. So I'm going to click on Get Started. Or actually, we'll install it as an npm dependency. So let's copy this command and go here, stop the development server and paste it. And this will install Materialized CSS in our project. All right, now that it's done installing, we can actually link it two ways. We can add it to the index.html. Actually, here we can change as well the title of the document. So let's say Angie tutorial, just to show you that you can change it here. And we can link the CSS and the JavaScript here, but the better way would be to go to the Angular JSON configuration file and link them here instead. So here, let's go to right here in styles. Let's link the Materialized CSS before our custom styles file. So here I'll say node modules, because that's where our dependencies are. Here say Materialized CSS slash dist slash CSS slash materialize dot min dot CSS, and put a comma. And here in scripts, I'm going to link the JS file. So here I'll say node modules slash materialize dash CSS slash dist slash JS slash materialize dot min dot JS. Let's save that. Save this as well. And let's again run ngserve. But this time let's run ngserve dash open, or for short we can just say -o, which will serve and open as well a window if you don't have any browser window open on that port. Even if you do, it's going to open a new one as well. Alright, so you see the style of the header has changed, indicating that the CSS was linked properly, and we can check there's no errors in the console, so that's fine. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to add a navbar to our app. So we can see here in the components in navbar. So this is a navbar basically. You can just copy this from the Materialized CSS. And here I want to create a component and put the navbar in its own component. Actually, I'm going to leave this open and open a new terminal window. And to create a component, we can create it manually, but we can also use the command line, the CLI tool. So we'll say ng generate component, and I'm gonna say components slash, because I want to put all the components in a components folder, and I'm gonna call this navbar and hit enter. Okay, so now that it's generated our component, we get this navbar folder, and we get 4 files in it. So we get a TS file in which our logic sits, an HTML file, our markup, a CSS file, our style for this component, and a spec file for testing using the test framework that Angular ships with. So I'm just going to delete this test file actually. We're not going to write any tests. And here if we go to the app module, we notice that it's automatically imported the navbar component and added it to the declarations. So in case if you want to create your own components, you have to do this as well. So you have to be wary of that. So now let's populate our navbar. So having copied that, I'm just going to paste whatever we copied here. And here let's say Angular tutorial for the logo. And these links will have an href of just hash, because they're not going to go anywhere. We're going to use the router to redirect, but for now we're just going to leave it like that. I'm going to have a link to the home and a link to, let's say, about. And let's save. Let's go to our app. Well, actually we need to put the navbar, of course, because otherwise we're not going to see it. It's just a component. So here in the app component, you notice in the TS file, it has in the component decorator, so this is a TS decorator, we have some metadata, and we have this selector property app navbar, which means wherever you are in the components, in any HTML file, you can say app navbar as a selector, and you will put this component in that spot. So if we go to our app component markup here, instead of saying our app, let's say before that we want to put our navbar. So here we just say app dash navbar tab, and we get this, and we save, and now Angular will put the navbar up there. Cool. All right, so I want to actually add some margin, and I want to add some, like, make these buttons come a bit inside. So here, so the navbar component, let's style this nav wrapper. So here in the CSS file, I'm gonna say .nav wrapper, and I'm gonna give it a max width of, let's say 1100 pixels, and say margin auto, and save. Let's go to our app. Actually, it doesn't change. I misspelled nav wrapper. It's 2 P's instead of 3. And there we go. We get our buttons pushed in, and the brand as well. Of course, these links don't go anywhere. So let's actually implement these two pages as components and have these links linked to actual pages instead of just being dummy links. So we're gonna have two pages, the about page, which has nothing, just using it to show you how the router works, and the post feed page, in which we have a list of posts and where we can add and interact with our posts. So here in the terminal window, I'm gonna say ng, and we can actually use shorthand notation. So we can say G for generate, C for component, and we'll say components. So in the same folder, slash, I'm gonna create the about, so say about, and now I don't want it to create that test file, the spec file. We can just say -- skip tests like this, and it will generate the about folder. And as we see here, it doesn't have that spec file. All right, so let's generate another one. So with the same command, and instead of about, I'm gonna say post -feed. So here we're gonna put all the posts. All right, let's go to the app module, and now what I want to do is I want to set the router, the Angular router, to route to these different pages. So the post feed component will be the default home page. So here I'll import, so I'll say import two things. So the router module and the routes from @Angular/router. And now we need to create our routes. So usually you would create a different module if you have too many routes, so not to inflate the app modules file with too much code. But since we only have 2 pages, I'm just going to do it here. So here I'll say const routes of type. Now we're going to use TypeScript, leverage TypeScript and use types. Routes, and it's an array of objects, and here we'll have for each object, see we have cool autocomplete, we get path, and here for this, the path of this will be nothing, so this will be the home page, and this takes as well a component, and the component for this will be the post feed component that's automatically imported. And I'm gonna add another one, so let's just copy this, and here we'll say the path will be, we don't need the slash, we can just say what we want it to be. So we want it to be a /about, so I'll say about, and this will link to the about component, like this. All right, we need to as well in the imports, so here we need to say router module, we need to bring it here, and we need to call a method called for route, and this takes our routes. So we'll pass it our routes, and let's save. And this alone will not work. We need to go to the app component, and here instead of, well, actually we'll leave the navbar, and underneath the navbar we need to add router-outlet for our router to work. So let's save. I don't know why it's indented it like that. All right, now it's not. Cool. All right, so here we see that post feed works. So the default route is post feed. And if we go to /about, we get that about works. And on both of them, we have the navbar because in the app component, we left it here. Let's have those navbar links as well take us to those pages. So let's go to the navbar component HTML. And here, in these links, instead of saying href, we need to use this property called router link. And this will be to just slash. And this as well, we need to give router link. And this will be to slash about. Let's change it as well here for the brand. Let's say router link equals just slash, and let's save. Let's go to our app, and now if I click about, it says about works. If I click home, it says post feed works. If I go to about and I click on the brand, it says post feed works as well. So, and you see the route is changing up here. So cool. So our router is set up. Let's set up our home component. Actually, before that, one thing that you don't have to necessarily do, but I personally like to do when working with Angular, it tends to get messy with too many files. So, for example, this app component CSS, I know I'm not going to be writing any global CSS here. If I want any global CSS, I'll write it in the style CSS. So I'm just actually going to delete this file. It's going to break because it's importing it here in the TS file. So in the app component TS file, I'm going to remove this styles URL because we no longer have that file. And one more thing I'm going to do, since in the app component HTML file is just these two selectors, I'm going to cut these from here and go to the app component TS. And here, instead of saying template URL, I'm going to just say template and do backticks, enter, and paste this here and save. And now I have that template there. I can just delete this HTML file. I can delete the spec file as well. We're not gonna test anything. And if we go to our app, it's still the same app. It still works. Nothing's changed. So now we have fewer files and it's less confusing when navigating our files. Actually, one thing I noticed is that our content goes further away. I want to put everything in a container so it's pushed to the middle. So here, I'm gonna cut this router outlet and say div with a class of container like this, and close this and tab and put this here and close the div and save. If we go back, we see that our content is being pushed to the middle. All right, so now we can put our post feed stuff. All right, so let's go to our post feed TS file. So here, what we want to do is, for us to show the posts, we need to fetch them first. So here we need to declare a property, let's say posts. And here we can give, we need to give the type. Now, since we're going to use post a lot in our application, we might as well create an interface for them right now. So there are a couple of conventions for doing this. You can create a folder in the app saying like interfaces or models. I like to put them all in one file. You don't have to follow my convention, you can follow yours as well. So here in the app, I'm going to create a file. I'm going to call it interfaces.ts. Here I'm going to export all the interfaces that I'm going to need for this app, which are just one, which is the post interface. So I'm going to say export interface post with a capital P. Post will have an ID, and I'm going to put a question mark, which means this is optional, and it's going to be of type string. And we're going to have a created at optional as well, so question mark. It's going to be of type string. We're going to have a user ID optional as well, so question mark string. We're going to have a title. This is required, so we don't put a question mark. It's going to be a string as well, and the body that's required, which is going to be a string as well. So now that we have our interface, we can bring it in our post feed component. So here we can say import post from, we go back one level and we go back another level, and from interfaces like this. Did I miss? Oh, here it's interfaces, not interfaces. Oops. So here we have that. So now that it's imported, we can say our posts are of type post, and it's going to be multiple of them. So it's going to be an array like this. And now what we want to do is each time our app starts and we get to this page, we want to fetch our posts to show them. We can do that in the constructor, but that's not good practice. We can do that in this. It's better to do it on this ng-on-init method, which starts once the component is loaded. we can send a HTTP request from this component to get our post, but it's better to abstract all the HTTP requests in one file, which is going to be a service, so that we can use them from multiple components. So here in the command line, I'm going to say ng, g for generate, s for service, and I'm going to say services, so to put them in the services folder. And here I'm just going to say /post, which is going to create our post service. And in this service, we're going to do all the HTTP operations. So here we get our post.service .ts. Actually, we get a spec file as well. Let me delete that. Forgot to put skip tests. And I'm going to, for now, close this index.html, the Angular JSON. We're not going to use any of these files. And the nav bar. So here we get our service, and it's got this injectable decorator, because this allows us to later use dependency injection and inject it into any component that will need to use it. So here we're going to import a couple of things. So we need to import our post interface. So go back one level to interfaces. And here we need to import the HTTP client so that we can send HTTP requests. So this is built into Angular. We don't need to install anything. We need to say import HTTP client, and we need as well HTTP headers. Later we're going to use these when sending post requests. And here we'll say from, and this used to be from the HTTP client. Now it's from the common sub library. So here we say from Angular at Angular /common/HTTP. And for us to be able to use this, we need to go to the app module and import the HTTP client module. So here we'll say import HTTP client module, module from at Angular /common /HTTP, and we need to add it as well as an import. So let's copy this and go to our imports and put a comma and put it here, and now we can actually use our HTTP client. One more thing we need to import here is the observable. So we say import observable from RxJS. And this works, it's similar to promises, but this works as a data stream, and actually in the background sends multiple promises as you get the data as a data stream. So don't worry too much about observable for now. So here we need to set a base, like a variable that we need to use, which is our base URL. So let's go here, and this will be in the description. I'm going to copy the base URL, so until dev here, and here I'll say API base URL of type string equals this value. And here in our constructor, we need to actually inject the HTTP client for us to be able to use it. So we say private HTTP of type, this is the name of the variable, so you can name it whatever you want, but the type has to be HTTP client. Now we can use this HTTP instance and send HTTP requests. So here let's put a method called getPosts, and we need to give this a type. Well, we don't need to, but it's better practice since we're using TypeScript. And here the type will be an observable. So observable, and this holds a type. So this is going to be a type of posts as an array, because we're going to get multiple posts. And here inside of this, we need to return this observable. So we need to do return this.http, which refers to our HTTP client instance, .get. And here we'll give a type as well of the return value. And here will be a post array like this. And this will take the API URL. So we'll do backticks, and we'll say $curly brace, and we'll put our API, this dot API base URL, and we need to add /posts to it to get all the posts. So we're gonna put some more functions later here to do other operations, but we'll leave it like this for now. And let's go back to our post feed, and here we need to inject our service. We need to import it first, so we'll say import post service from, and go back 2 levels, services /post dot service. Here we need to inject it in the constructor, so we'll say private post service camel cased of type post service Pascal cased. Now we can use this post service. So here on init, so on ng on init, we'll say this dot post service dot, we get the suggestions here, so we use get posts, so get posts, and here this is an observable, so we need to subscribe to it, so we'll say subscribe, and here we'll for the first variable of the observable will be the data that we get back, which is going to be our posts. Of course, this is, we can name this whatever you want, it's just an argument of the function. So we'll say posts, and we will do the following. We'll open curly braces, and what we're going to do, we're just going to say this dot posts for this one equals posts, which is the returned result from the request. So we got our posts now. We need to just display them on our front end. So in the template file, in the HTML, in the post feed HTML file, let's delete this and let's create a row, so dot row, and inside of here we'll have so the column dot call dot s6, which will hold half of the screen width. What we're gonna do now is iterate through our posts array, and for each post show a certain template for our post. So here in our div call s6, we'll add a directive called, so we'll do star ng4, and this is what we're gonna use to loop through our array, and we'll say as the value of this, let post of posts. What this will do is it will iterate through posts, and even if it's empty, it's not going to show anything. If it's got some posts, for each post it's going to return this div with whatever that's inside of it. So inside of here we want to do, we're going to put a card, so I'll say dot card, and inside of here I'll say dot card content, and inside, this is all materialized by the way, and here we'll have a card title, so I'll say p dot card title. And inside of this title, we want to put the title of the post. So now we're going to use a string interpolation and do 2 curly braces, and we'll say post dot title, because remember we got this post inside of this loop, so we have access to that single post. And here after the title, I want to put when this post was created. So we'll say p, and I'm going to give this a class of timestamp so I can style it later. And inside of here we'll have the post, so we'll say, put double curly braces, post dot created at. Let's close this, and here after that we'll just have a paragraph which will have the post dot body, so the body of the post, and after this div we'll have another div with a class of so dot card action. And here we'll have 2 buttons, so I'll say a link, and it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to say edit, and we can just copy this and paste it and say delete. So we're going to add functions to edit and delete them, but for now they're not going to do anything. So let's save this and see what this looks like. Alright, let's go to our app, refresh. Okay, there's a problem. This .post service .get post is not a function. Maybe we have to restart the server again. So let's do ng serve. Alright, so yeah, we had to restart the server because we created a service, and for us, we need to restart the server when we do that. So there we go. We get all our posts, and they're in this card. And for each one, we get this card with the title, the time it was created, and the body, and these buttons that don't do anything right now. Let's format this date. Let's go here. And what's cool about Angular, we get these features, and here we don't need to install anything. Here in the So right here in the post created at, we need to do this wall. I don't know what you call this character. I call it wall. And this here we'll use something called a pipe. And the pipe just transforms a string into a different looking thing. There are a couple of pipes, you can look into them. But here I'm going to use the date pipe. So we'll just do this wall, date, and save. Let it compile, and we go to our app, and there we go. We get this date formatted nicely, and you can as well say date colon and put your format. I don't know, we can say month, year, year, and it will format it like that. Maybe I put a wrong format, I don't know. Maybe it has to be in lowercase, but you get the vibe. You can look at the pipe and the formats, and you can, you know, customize the way you show your data on the front end. One thing I want to do quickly though is I want to style this date to be closer to the title, and I want it to be gray to not attract too much attention from the body of the title of the post. So here in the post feed CSS file, so I want to target this card title rather. So I'll say .card and .card content. I've done this before, and you have to be specific in your CSS rule targeting, otherwise the style will not be applied. I want to apply a margin of 0 because I want the date to be right underneath it. And here for that timestamp, so p.timestamp, I want to give it a color, like a gray color, so I'll say RGB 180, 180, 180. And here I'll give it a margin bottom of 15 pixels, so it pushes the body away a bit. Cool. All right, so we get it grayed out and the body goes a bit down. All right, so now what I want to create is here before the post, I want to create the form that lets us submit a new post. All right, so here let's close this. At the top here we can put our form, but instead of putting everything in one component, let's take advantage of Angular and actually create this in its own component. So here I'm going to put another row, so .row, and I'm going to say .call.s6 because I want it to take half the width of the screen. And here I'll call it post form. So I'm going to put a selector app post form. Remember, whenever you create a component, Angular by default adds to the selector this app prefix, and if you don't like that, you can actually change it. You can go to these the TS file, and to the selector you can just put this as just post feed and just use the selector post feed, but I'm just going to leave it like that app. It doesn't bother me. All right, so here in the command line I'm going to say ng-gc, so generate components slash, so what did I call this? I just already forgot. Yeah, post form. So post dash form. All right, so we get post form right here. Again, I forgot to do skip test, so I got this TS spec file, so I'm removing it. So here in our post form, we need to import the post interface because we need that here as well. So I go back 2 levels and say interfaces. And here I want to have a post property. So let's say post of type post. And I want to use a loading boolean, because what I want to do is when I send the a post, I want it to start loading, and then once it's received, stop loading, so that it would show like a spinner and then reset the form once it's sent. So we'll say loading of type boolean, and it's going to be initially set to false. All right, so let's go to the HTML file. So no, actually not post feed, post form right here. Instead of this paragraph, I'm gonna have a form, and here we'll have so I want this form to show if we're not loading, so we'll use another directive called ng if, and here we'll say not loading. So if we're not loading, so if this loading is false, we show this form. And there are a couple of ways of approaching forms in Angular. I'm going to use the template-driven approach, which gives us more power in validating the form. So here we need to set this variable, this hash variable, and I'll call it post form, like this. And it's going to be ng. I'm going to be bound to ng form, and here we'll have an event. And here I'll say ng submit. So this is an event done by Angular, which is kind of similar to a custom event that we'll create for submitting a form. Instead, this automatically in the background prevents the default behavior of the form and then gives us the ability to handle our form. So here we were gonna bind it to a method, and we'll call it onSubmit, and it's gonna take our form. So we'll pass it post form like this, and we're gonna create this in the TS file later as well. And here I'm gonna give it like some inline style. I'll just want to give it some margin at the bottom, or actually on all sides. I'm just gonna say 50 pixels like this. I might be editing this later. So let's close this like this, and here inside the form we're gonna have a div of the class input field. This is Materialized stuff. You can look at the Materialized CSS documentation, and here we'll have our first field. So we'll have a label for us, say label for title, and it's gonna say title like this. And here we'll have an input, so input. So we'll have a couple of things, so a type, which is gonna be text, and we'll have a class. And we'll give this the class of validate, which will allow Materialized CSS to validate our input depending on the state of our data in our form. So here I'll give this a name of title, and here I'm gonna give it a property called ngModel, and I'm gonna do something called two-way data binding. And I'll explain later what the significance of this two-way data binding is, but for now let's just say post.title. So this will be this is this post right here. So any change in this input will change the value of this post variable. And here I'm gonna say required, which is gonna tell Angular that this field is required and it must not be empty. So here I'll put, actually we need to close this like this. So here I'll put a span with the class helper text, which is a materialized CSS thing that shows some text underneath the input. And here I'll say data-error. So in case we have an error, the error will be, and I'll say title must not be empty, because that's the only error that we can have for the title. We don't have any rules, other rules. So I'm just gonna copy this one more time, paste it, and here we'll just change this. The label is for body, and you will say body like this. The type is text, validate the same. The name will be body, and it's gonna be bound to post.body. And here in the helper text we'll say body must not be empty. Now here underneath this div we need to have our submit button. So we'll say button of type submit. I'm gonna give it a class waves effect, which is gonna give it a cool effect of the ripple effect when we click it, the material design ripple effect. I'm gonna say waves light. I'm gonna give it the class of btn, and here I'm gonna give it I'm gonna bind a property to it. So in Angular you can actually take any HTML property and use this binding and use a condition for it. So what I want to do is I want this button to be disabled if our form is not valid. So if our form is not valid, I want this button to not be clickable. So I'll say disabled, and this will take a condition. And this condition will be not post form, which is the reference for this form, dot valid. Now ng forms have this property valid, and if it's true that means our form is valid. So if it's not true, I want this button to be disabled. So let's close this tag, and here this button will say add, like this. But for our form to work, we need to, because we're using the ng form, we need to bring in the forms module from Angular. So here I'll say, in the app module, I'll say import forms module from @Angular/forms. And here we need to add it in the imports array and say forms module like this so that it will work. All right, let's go back to our post form. So the form is done. Let's go to the TS file. Now that we have that data, let's add the onSubmit method that will handle this form. So here we'll say onSubmit, which will take our form, and this will be of type ng form, and it will VS Code automatically imports that from Angular forms. If it doesn't for you, you can manually type this. So inside of here, what we need to do is we need to say if form.valid. Actually, this check is redundant because the button itself is disabled if the form is not valid. So I can skip this if form is valid because this will not be triggered if it's not valid anyway. So we'll say this.loading. So we want to set the loading first to true while we send data to our server. And actually, we need to create a function or method in our post service to send this post to the server. So in the post service here, I'm gonna create this clever method called write post. I'll explain why I created it like this. So this will take a post of type post, and it will return an observable holding a post. So singular, just one. And here what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna say if post.id, if it's got an ID, for now I'm just gonna return null because I want to handle the other case. So let's say else, because what I want to do is I want this write post to address both the post and the put requests. So if it has an ID, that means this post has existed before and we're just editing an existing post. If it doesn't, that means this is a new post and we need to hit the post route and create a new post. So here, else, if it doesn't have an ID, so it's a new one, we'll say return this.http.post. So it's going to be a post method, and the return will be of type post. And here what we need to do, we need to open this and we need to have a URL. So the URL will be $ curly brace this.api base URL /post without an S, and this needs a body. So the body will be this post that we got passed in, this one right here, and we need to as well give a options that say that because we need to tell our server that this is we need to add the header, the content type of application JSON, but we need to add this header to the other request as well. So let's put this in a variable. So here I'll say options equals an object, and this object will hold a headers property. This will be new HTTP headers, and we'll pass it this object. We'll only have the one header, which is the content type, and the value for this will be application/JSON. All right, so here we will pass this third as the third argument, options. Actually, this.options, because it's in the class. We'll save and go back to our post form, and here we'll say this.post. Well, actually, we need to import the post service. So let's say import post service from, go back 2 levels to services /post.service, and we need to inject it in our constructor. So we say private post service of type post service, and here we'll say this dot post service dot, so we get this new method write post, and we'll pass it this dot post, and this is an observable, so we need to subscribe, and the first argument is the success. So post, so when we get our post back, we need to just set this dot loading to false, so we get our form back. Let's save all files. All right, let's go to our app. So we get our form right here, and if we click here on the title and we click away, we get this validation message saying that the title must not be empty, and we get the same thing for body. So if we put something here, let's say new post from Angular, and we put the body will be post from Angular, and we click add. Okay, so the form goes away. Actually, we have this error here that says cannot read property title of undefined, and that's because, oh yeah, because it's actually undefined. I just gave it a type, but we need to here initialize a value for it. So let's put our post like this equals, it's gonna have a title of nothing, empty string, and a body of an empty string as well. So this way we have an initial value, and it's not null. So let's go back to our app, open the console, and now we don't have any error. And if we'll say new post from Angular, and say the body will be Angular rocks, and click add. All right, so it loads for a second, it comes back. Of course, we don't get our post because we're not adding it to our list. And if we refresh, we get our new post, and so it's been created and it's been persisted on the server. But of course, the form looks weird, so let's fix that. So we can fix that by just here, when we get our post back from the server, we need to just say this dot post equals, and we just reset the value to these. So we can just copy this, and here just say this and save. If we go back to our app, let's say another one, DJ Khaled, I guess. Don't even know how to spell Khaled. Okay, add. There, our form resets properly, so it's empty now. It loads for a second, and but of course we don't get our post. We reload, we see our post. We're gonna fix it that we get our post instantly. But I wanna do something here in the post form. I forgot to add something. Here at the bottom, I wanna add a div with a class of progress, and this will show a spinner. So here I'm gonna add another div with a class of indeterminate, which shows a loading bar. And here I'll put an ng directive, say ng if, and this will be if loading. So for loading, we want to show this loading thing. So here I'm gonna just put some gibberish and click add, and there you see that spinner for a second, or it's not a spinner, it's a loading bar for a second. But you see here at the top, what I want to do, I want to add some margin to it so that it's here at the middle. So in the post form CSS file, I'm going to target that progress, so dot progress, and say margin, and give it 100 pixels on the top and bottom, and on the left and right just say auto, save. And now let's go to our app. I'm just going to type some gibberish again, click add, and there we go. We get that loading bar in the middle, which looks a bit better than it does now. All right, now let's fix the fact that our post is not added to our list of posts down here. Let's close this post form CSS. So here in the post form, once we send our request and we get our post back from the server, what we can do, we can as well from the post feed again fetch our post from the server, but that's not efficient. That means each time we send a post, we send 2 requests to our server. Instead, what we can do using this response, because the fact that we got a response, that means it's successfully added a post on the server, we can just manually on our front end add this post object to our list that's stored just on the front end. So what we need to do is we need to communicate from this post form component to our post feed component and tell it, look, add this new post that we just created. So for this, we're going to use something called event emitters. So up here, I'm going to import 2 more things from Angular core, which are going to be the event emitter and output. And here we'll say at the top of our class, here we'll say, actually I'm going to put it at the top, say at output, this decorator, you call it like this, and I'm going to call it add post event. And this is going to be of type event emitter and of type post. So event emitters hold a type because they emit data, and this data happens to be a post in this case. So we need to initialize it, so equals new event emitter like this. So what we need to do now from here when we create our post, so once our creation has been successful, here we need to say this dot add post event dot emit, and we need to emit this post that we got back. So now we need to go to our post feed HTML, and here we need to catch this event. So we can catch it anywhere, but I'm just going to put it here in the form because it's coming from the form, so it makes more sense to put it there. So I'll say add post event. So we're listening to this event. So whenever this event is called, do the following. And the following is, I'm going to call this on post added, and this will take an event. So this event that's been fired. So now we go in our post feed TS file. We need to create this on post added method. So here we'll say on post added, and it will take new post of type post. So whenever that event is fired and it's emitted, this will be triggered because of how we set it up from here. So here what we need to do, we need to just add this post to this posts array. So we'll just say this dot posts, and I want to add it to the top. So we'll use unshift, and we pass it this post, and we save. Or actually not post, I called it new post. And we save, let's save everything, and let's go to our app. Let's test it now, and let's say new post to be added, and say body like adding post. Let's click add. Cool, so we get the loading, it resets, and we get our post added immediately right here. So now we need to wire the delete and the edit and delete buttons. So here I'm gonna go to the post service and add these functionalities. So here I'm gonna, after the write post, I'm gonna add the delete post method. So let's say delete post, and this will take the ID of the post, which is gonna be a string, and it's gonna return, is it gonna return anything? I think, let's say observable. Yeah, it returns an object. So say observable of type any, and here we'll say it will return this dot http dot delete, and we'll pass this, so backticks $ curly brace this dot API base URL / post / we need to concatenate this ID, so do again $ curly brace ID. All right, so we need to do as well the edit post. So right here in the write post, when we receive a post, if it has an ID, that means we're editing this post. So here we'll say return this dot http dot put, and the return of this will be of type post, and here this will be at, so backticks, and we put $ curly brace this dot API base URL / post / post actually we need to put a variable here, so concatenate post.id like this, and it needs a second parameter which is going to be this post, and it needs a third parameter which is going to be our options, so this dot options, which hold our headers of content type application JSON. All right, let's save this, and let's go now to our post feed component. We can close this post service because we're done there. So in the post feed component right here in the edit link, we'll say, or action, we'll bind a click event. So click equals, so once this button is clicked, this will happen, and this will be a function or a method called, so in the edit, we'll call it edit post, and we'll pass it this post that we have. Remember, we got this post here. And for the delete, so once this is clicked as well, we need to call delete post, and we can just pass it post.id, so we can access as well the properties. So let's go to the post feed ts file, and let's create those two methods. And here we'll have edit post, which takes a post of type post, and for now it's just gonna console log that post. I want to do the delete first, so let's say delete post, which takes an ID of type string, and what it will do is it needs to call the post service delete post method. So we'll say this dot, not like this dot post service dot delete post, and we need to pass it this ID. So this returns us an observable, so we need to subscribe to it. So let's say dot subscribe, and we have no return value, so we can just leave the argument empty, and we'll do curly braces, and we'll say what we need to do now. We have our collection of posts, and when we get to this block, that means the deletion has been successful. So what we need to do is we need to find the post inside of our posts array, and we need to remove it manually. So what we need to use is we'll say this dot posts equals this dot posts dot filter, which keeps only a certain which keeps only elements with a certain condition, and this condition will be, so let's say post where post dot id, and our condition will be when the id does not equal this id that we have been passed. So that means keep all the posts that don't have this ID. In other words, that says just remove the one post that has this ID. So let's save, and this should work. Actually save all files, and let's go to our app, and let's actually delete this gibberish right here. Click delete, there we go, it's gone. And we click delete this one, it's gone. Can actually delete all the ones that I created today, so until here. Yeah, May 9th, so delete all of these, and we have 5 left. And if we reload, it's actually persistent. On the database, they've been deleted. All right. Let's actually add the limiter. I want to add an input that we will use to limit the number of posts that we get. So here I'm going to add a property in the post feed, and say this property, I'll call it post limit, and it's going to be of type number, and by default will be 5. And the way I want to set it to be is I want to set it as a local configuration. So any machine will store a configuration of this, and it will persist even if you reload the application. So I want to save this in local storage. So here I'm going to create a method, not here, call it set limit, and here we'll say what it will do is that it will reach for our local storage, so local storage dot set item, and I'll call this post limit like this, and the value will be this dot post limit, and local storage only stores strings, so we need to chain to string on top of this to make it into a string, and then I want to say this dot post service, and call a method that's similar to get post, but it only gets a certain number of posts. So let's call this get number of posts, which hasn't been created yet, but we will in a moment. And we'll pass it this dot post limit like this. And of course it's going to return an observable, so we'll subscribe to that. And here we get our posts back. And what we need to do, we just set our this dot posts equals to this post that we got. So let's go to our post service, and underneath the get post we'll say get number of posts, and this will take a limit of type number, and it will return an observable of type post array, and it will return this .http .get of type post array like this, and this will be to slash or this dot API base URL slash posts slash, we need to concatenate this limit right here so that we'll only get that number of posts like we saw earlier when I tested it in Postman. So we'll go back to post feed. Now we need to implement this in the template. So here in the template, well actually not in the post form, in the post feed, underneath the form, I'm going to create a .call.s1, just want it to take like a really minimal width, and I'm going to give it some margin, so style. You can put this style in the CSS to avoid inline styling, but I'm okay with it for now. So let's say margin 50 pixel, and inside of here we'll have a form, and why is this indented like this? It'll be like this form. We'll have no action, and inside the form we'll have our input. So here input with type number, and this will have a name, post limit, and we will do a double binding to and we'll bind ng model to post limit. What the double binding means is that it will get the value from this post limit variable in the TS file, and if that changes there as well, it will change this, so they both change each other. That's what double binding means. And here we'll have a button, so button, no type. We'll have a click event, and this will call the set limit like this, and you will have a class of waves effect and waves light and btn as well, and you will say, or you will just say set like this. And now what should happen is that when we click this and we have changed the value, right here we have changed the value of the post limit, and we click this, we will send a request to our server and get just that number of posts. So let's save all files. Let's go to our app. So we have number 5 here, and it just so happens that we have 5. It didn't limit it right now. I'll prove it by adding like some gibberish and reloading. It actually gets all of them, which is 6. So if we click 3 here and we click set, it actually gets us 3 posts. And if we look at our developer tools and we go to application and we go to our storage, and we see that it stored this key post limit and the value of 3. So if we reload, that's still persistent, and we get 5, but we still have that value. Actually, we need to get that value from local storage once the application loads. So here in ng-on-init, after getting posts, we need to say, we need to check for it because maybe it's not in existence. So we'll say if local storage dot get item, and the item name is post limit. So if this is not null, then we need to do this dot post limit equals local storage dot get item post limit. All right, let's save. Got squiggly line here saying type string is not assignable to type number. Oh, it's because this is stored as a string. So let's add parse int to let's call parse int on this so that it will transform it into an integer. And let's save. Let's go to our app, and there we go. We get 3. And if we do just one and we set, so we get one, and if we close our app and we reload here, it sets this to 1. It gets it from the storage. All right. So now what we need to do, we need to handle this edit, because right now if we click it, it just prints the that post to the console. What we want to do is that when we click edit, we want the details of that edited post to jump up here, and then we can edit them there, and then click add, and that will edit that specific post instead of adding a new one in the same form. All right. So the way we'll do this is that we want to, when we click edit post, we want to send this post from the post feed to our post form component so that we can access it there. So here in edit post, actually I'm going to create a new property here, call it, let's call it editing post, and it will be of type post, and it will be initially set to an object with the body of nothing and the title of an empty string, so they're both empty strings. And here when we click edit post, we just want to do this dot editing post, or not edit post, editing post equals this post that we clicked. And now we go to the HTML, and here in the form we want to bind to this, so inside of our post form, what is the post form component, we want to set this post value to that editing post value once it's clicked. So here we'll say post, which is, we're referring to this post right here, equals editing post, which refers to this editing post right here. So once that has values, this will have values as well. But what we need to do here is we need to say that this is an input. This is coming from, this could potentially come from outside of this component itself. So for this, I'm going to import one more thing, which is input, which is the opposite of output. And here we'll add this decorator. So at input, like this, and it will be this post. And now we actually no longer need to initialize it like this as an empty object, or like an object with empty fields, because it's already been initialized in the post feed right here. All right. So now when we click, we get values, and those values get from here, they get added from here to here, and then when they're here, they are actually bound using this post equals editing post. And then when we get them as an input here, so they are assigned to the form values, and then when we hit the write post function or method, we send this post. You don't actually see it, but this post, when we get it from the post feed component, it does actually have an ID key within it, which then tells our post service that, looks, this has an ID, that means this is an edit. So we need to send a put request instead of post request. All right, this is a bit confusing at first, using events and using input and output between components, but it gets, the more you practice it, you get familiar with it, and it becomes more seamless. All right, so let's save all files. And now let's go to our app, just reload just in case. And let's say I want to edit this latest one, or let's edit this post 5, and click edit. We get our values, but for some reason that the label doesn't go up, but that's fine. Let's say I want to edit it and say post 5 edited. It's actually editing it in real time right here, which is pretty cool. You can see right here. If we click add, all right, it actually adds a new one, or does it? Let's reload. Oh, okay, I know why. It actually doesn't add a new one. It did actually edit that post, but because we didn't edit the logic where we're, when we click add right here in the post feed component, we're still triggering that event. But here what we need to do is that when we get a new post, we want to check if it already exists in the post array. That means this is a post that has been edited, and we just need to change that in the array instead of adding it to the array. So here we'll just say, I'm going to cut this for now. I'll say if this dot posts dot find, and the condition will be post, or just p, where p dot id equals new post dot id. Now this is a condition, so if we find a post in our array with the same ID as this new post, that means a post is being edited. So here we need to find the index of this post and just replace it in this array with this new post that we got. So we'll say const, I want to find this index first, we'll say const index equals this dot posts dot find index of post, where post p.id equals, I could have put this in a variable, but whatever, equals new post.id. This works as well, and it's a bit more expressive. So say now we got that index, we'll say this.posts.splice, which removes, takes an index, it starts removing. So we will start removing at this index, and it will remove only one post, and it will replace it with this new post. And that's how splice works. Else, so here, if we get here, that means we didn't find this ID in this array. That means this is a new post. That means we just simply unshift with this new post. All right, let's save, and this should work now. Let's go to our app. So let's say we want to edit this learn Angular, and we wanted to say learn Angular JS, which is Angular 1. It changes it here. We click add, and there we go. Just this changes, and it doesn't add a new one. And if we actually want to add a new one, it adds a new one right here. And this set works. All right, so everything works in our app. And yeah, so this is your entry-level Angular. This is, I would say this is 70% of what you will need most of the time. If anything, you'll need later state management using NGRX and some other additional features. I feel like I could have explained things in a more in-depth manner, but I would just end up making this video much longer. So if you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section. I'll help with what I can. If you like this video, please drop a like. If you love this type of content and you want to support me, please subscribe and hit the bell button to not miss any of my video. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.